November 4th, 1883. A Tuesday in the Montana high country, so cold the cinches snapped on a horse if you did not warm them with your hands. On that Tuesday, a woman rode alone into the Ashby Valley, and the town had not told her she was not supposed to, and the man at the end of the valley had not been told she was coming, and the boy behind the door had not been told anything at all. Stay with me. By the time the snow melts, you will know what made him change his mind, what it cost her, and what a stubborn widower had to lose before a woman on a borrowed mare could ever call his cattle, his ranch, or his son by her own name. Welcome back to the channel. I am so glad you are here tonight. Pull the blanket up and let me introduce you to Greta. You are Greta Hale. You are 28, short, broad in the shoulder, with hands like a man's hands, and a face that has been burnt by so much sun that the tan will never come out. Your father taught you to ride before he taught you to read. Your brother Tom taught you to throw a loop on a yearling before he taught you to dance. Tom was killed in August, thrown from a horse in the high pasture, and the cabin you shared is now yours alone. The neighbors have begun to ask questions that are not really questions, and you have answered them by packing the saddle and riding north. You have heard, in a town 200 miles south, that a man named Harlan Ashby has a ranch, a herd, and a boy of 8, and not enough hands to keep any of it alive through the winter. You have not come to be a wife. You have come because you can work a herd, and because in that country, in that year, a woman who can work a herd has only one way to be allowed to do it, and that way is through a man who will let her. Harlan Ashby was on the porch when you rode in, with a coffee cup in his left hand and his right hand on the porch post, in a way that looked casual and was not. He had a rifle leaning against the wall within reach, and he did not pick it up, and he did not move it further away. The boy, Joel, was behind him, half hidden by the door, with a face that was so much like his mother's that you had to look away for a moment. You did not dismount. You let the mare walk up to the hitching post, and you waited, because you had decided on the trail that you were not going to get off a horse for a man who had not invited you to get off. The man did not send you away. Ashby Place, he said, in a voice that was the voice of a man who has had this conversation with himself 100 times. It was not a question. My name is Greta Hale, you said. I can ride, I can rope, I can doctor a sick cow, and I can mend a fence. I am willing to sleep in the barn, eat what your men eat, and be paid at the end of the season, in cattle, and not in coin. I am not here to marry you. I am here to work. The man did not respond for a long time. He drank his coffee. He looked out across the brown grass toward the south pasture, where the cattle were scattered in a way that told you, before he said a word, that the herd was not being worked the way a herd ought to be worked. I have no work for a woman, the man said finally. He did not say it unkindly. He said it the way a man says a thing he has already decided. I have no place for a woman, and I have no time for whatever kind of trouble a woman alone brings with her. He paused, and then he said, in a voice that cost him more, I have lost one woman to this ranch, and I do not intend to find out whether I have buried her or whether she is still in this house by bringing another one in. You did not argue. You had not expected to win the day. You tipped your hat the way you had been taught and turned the mare and rode back down the trail. Joel, behind the door, watched you go with the look of a boy who has just been told that the world is going to keep on being the way the world has been. You did not go back to Clyde. You went half a mile down the creek, where the town had told you about a line cabin with a working chimney and a door that still closed. You unpacked the saddle, fed the mare, and sat on the step. And you did not cry, because you had decided somewhere on the trail that you were not going to cry in this country. And so the offer was made, and so the offer was refused. But on a Montana ranch, in November, a refusal is not the same thing as a woman leaving. Stay with me. The first week was the hardest, and the second week was worse, because the second week was when Harlan Ashby started watching you. He never came down to the line cabin. He never sent the boy. He never left a plate of food on the fence rail, because Harlan was not yet a kind man. What he did was quieter. He rode the south pasture at dawn, and he rode it again at dusk, and the line he chose for his ride passed within sight of your cabin. He did not wave. He did not tip his hat. He just rode past, and the dust his horse kicked up settled on your roof. You understood the message. The message was the message of a man who could not say yes and could not make himself say no, so he said nothing at all, and he watched. You had seen the man before, in other towns, in other winters, and you had learned that the man who watches is the man who is closer to saying yes than the man who speaks. You made yourself useful in the way you had promised. You did not ride his herd without permission. You did not touch his fences. You cut wood in the creek bottom and stacked it where the wind would not take it. Twice at night, you left a small bundle of dried meat on the porch rail. The second time, the bundle was gone in the morning, and the note you had left with it was not answered, but the blacking was on the rail the next evening. That was the language the Ashbys spoke, and you had decided in the first week that you were going to learn it. Joel was the one who broke the silence. He came on a Wednesday, when the air had the bite that means snow is on the way. He was 8, with the long look of a boy who had learned to read weather before he had learned to read words. He came on a small bay mare, with no saddle, only a folded blanket, and he brought with him a paper bag of cold biscuits and a piece of information he had clearly been saving for days. "Pa is hurt," he said. "He got kicked last week. He told me not to say, but he can't sit the saddle this morning. And we got cattle in the south draw that need driving before the storm. And I don't know how to do it. And I tried, and the bay threw me." He held out his arm, and there was a long, ugly scrape from elbow to wrist. You did not say a word. You went inside, washed the scrape with water you had boiled that morning, and bound it with a strip of clean cloth from your own shirt. Then you put on your hat. "You wait here," you said. "I will be back by dark. Do not follow me. Do not tell your pa." Joel nodded, and he sat on your step and did not move. The south draw was 4 miles of broken ground, and the cattle were scattered through it, and the snow was already beginning to come down. You had a quarter of an hour to find them, push them up to the high ground, and get them moving north. You did it the way Tom had taught you, slowly, without shouting, by letting the lead cow do her own thinking. By dusk, The herd was in the upper pasture, and the snow was coming down in sheets, and you rode back to the line cabin where Joel was still on the step, still waiting, with the biscuits gone and half a cup of cold coffee left in the tin cup for you. It was the best coffee you had been offered in a month, because it had been offered by a child who had decided, without saying it out loud, that you were someone worth waiting for. You did not see Harlan that night. You did not need to. You knew, before you blew out the lamp, that the next morning the boy would come again, until one of you said out loud what the cattle and the snow and the borrowed blacking had been saying for a week. Harlan came the next morning. He did not knock. He sat his horse in front of the cabin for the better part of a minute before you stepped out. He had a stiffness in his left side that he was trying to hide, and he was failing at it. "The south draw," he said, in a statement, not a question. "Yes," you said. "The herd is up, the fence is down. I can show you where." He nodded once, and that was as close to thank you as you were going to get. He turned the horse and started to ride, and then he stopped. "Get your saddle," he said without looking back. "I need you to point." You did not waste a word. You had the mare saddled in 4 minutes, and you rode out together without speaking. And the silence between you was the silence of two people who have decided, by mutual agreement, to leave something unsaid until the work is done, because the work is the only ground on which the two of you have been able to meet without one of you having to lose. The fence took most of the day. Harlan worked one-handed, favoring his ribs, and you did not offer to do the work for him, because you understood that the fastest way to lose a man like Harlan is to take the tools out of his hands. So you did the work he could not do, and you let him do the work that mattered to him, and you fell, without planning it, into a rhythm that surprised both of you. The rhythm of two people who have done the same kind of work in two different valleys, and who have not, until this fence, this morning, this storm, had a chance to find out that the rhythm was the same. It was on the third rail, with the wind coming up hard from the north, that he spoke. "You should not have been out yesterday," he said. "The storm was on the way. A man could have died in that draw. You set your end of the rail into the post, and you did not look at him, because the words deserved more than a look. A woman could have died too," you said. "A boy would have, if I had not." He did not answer. He had the look of a man who has just been told a true thing he did not want to hear, and who knows that the true thing is going to follow him into the house and into the long nights, and who knows also that he cannot pretend in front of you that the true thing is not true. You finished the fence in silence. By the time you rode back, the storm was already on you, and it came in fast the way Montana storms do, with a wind that lifted the snow off the ground and threw it sideways. You lost sight of Harlan twice in the first quarter mile, and you had to follow the sound of his horse, not the sight of it. The mare knew the way home. You trusted the mare, and you trusted yourself. And you made it back to the ranch yard an hour after dark, with the herd behind you, and Harlan half a length behind, and the snow so thick that you could not see the porch until you were nearly on it. He was off the horse before you could offer a hand. He stood in the yard for a long time, breathing in shallow pulls. Then he said, in a voice that was barely louder than the wind, "You will sleep in the house tonight." You opened your mouth to refuse, and he cut you off. Do not argue with me, Miss Hale. The barn is half a mile from the house, and the storm is going to last 3 days, and I will not have you freeze to death a quarter mile from my porch for the sake of propriety." The word propriety came out of his mouth, the way a man says a word he has just remembered he is supposed to say. It was not the real reason. The real reason was standing in front of him, covered in snow, too proud to ask for shelter and too honest to refuse it, and he knew it, and you knew it, and neither of you said it. Joel had a fire going in the kitchen and a pot of beans on the stove. He had set a third plate at the table without being asked, and the third plate was the most honest thing that had been said in the house in 2 winters. You sat down, you ate. You did not stay long because you had decided on the trail that the woman who stays too long in a man's house is a woman the town will not forgive, and you were not yet ready to be unforgiven, but you slept that night in a bed for the first time in 3 weeks. And when you woke in the morning, the storm was still going, and Joel was sitting on the floor outside your door with a book, pretending to read, pretending not to wait for you to come out. The pretending made you laugh for the first time in 2 months. And the laughing was the kind of laughing that a woman allows herself only when she has decided, without knowing she has decided, that the house she is standing in is not a stranger's house. The storm lasted 4 days. By the 2nd day, you were the one running the kitchen, and Harlan was the one pretending not to notice. By the 3rd day, the men from Clyde had stopped coming up the road, and the only footprints in the snow were the ones you made. By the 4th day, the wind died, and the world outside was so white and so quiet that the silence hurt the ears. It was on the morning of the 5th day that Joel disappeared. You were the first to notice, because you had been keeping track of the boy, the way a woman keeps track of a thing she is not supposed to care about and cannot help caring about. You knew his rhythms. You knew he woke with the light. You knew he liked to be at the kitchen table before his father, and that the only thing he liked better was a new calf in the south pasture, which he had been checking on every other morning since the storm. By the time the sun was fully up, you had the count of all of those things wrong. The small pair of boots in the rack was missing. You found Harlan at the corral. He had not noticed yet. He was breaking ice on the trough with a hammer. You did not waste time. Joel is gone, you said. His horse is gone. He has been gone since first light. Harlan went pale in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. And you knew that he was about to blame himself, and that the blaming was going to be the kind of blaming a man does not come back from. And that if you did not get on the horse in the next 4 minutes, the boy was not going to come back. I will bring him back, you said. I will bring him back, and we will not speak of this again. And you will not blame yourself for the rest of your life. Do you hear me, Mr. Ashby? He heard you. He nodded. You saddled the mare in 3 minutes and rode out. You found Joel 2 miles to the south, sitting in a snowdrift with the bay mare standing over him, both of them half frozen, both of them too proud to die, and beside them a heifer that had calved early, and a calf that was still wet and still alive. You took the calf first, because the calf was the reason Joel was there, and the calf was the reason Joel was alive. You wrapped the calf in your coat. You lifted Joel onto the bay. You put the heifer behind you on the mare, and you started the long ride back. And the wind was still on the north. And the wind was the kind of wind that reminds a woman of the kind of men she has known, and the kind of grief she has carried, and the kind of hope she has not yet allowed herself. You do not remember much of the ride back. You remember the cold. You remember the weight of the boy against your chest when the bay slipped. You remember the way the mare stopped, twice, and would not move, and the way you talked to her, low and steady, until the mare decided you were right. You remember the porch. You remember the door. You remember Harlan lifting the boy off the horse with one arm, and the sound he made when the ribs gave, and the way he did not put the boy down. You remember being helped off the mare. You remember coffee in a tin cup with sugar in it that you had not asked for. You do not remember anything after that until morning. You woke in the same bed. Joel was asleep on the floor beside it, in a nest of blankets, with the cat. Harlan was asleep in the chair by the window, with his head on his chest and his hand on the arm of the chair, and his hand was not quite touching the chair. It was not quite not touching it either. You did not move it. You went back to sleep because you had decided in the long ride back that the man in the chair was not yet a man you could name, but that he was, in the way that mattered, a man you could not leave, and that the decision to stay, which had been, until this morning, a decision you had been making with your head, was now a decision your body had made for you. And that is the moment, listeners, that the title of this story has been waiting for. The widower was going to refuse. He had refused, in fact, 3 times. He had refused with his words, with his silence, with the line cabin, with the borrowed blacking, with every tool a man in 1883 had at his disposal. And then, on a morning so cold that the milk froze in the pail, his son came home on a stranger's horse, because a woman he had sent away had gone out to fetch him. And the man understood finally that the refusal was not a position. The refusal was a kind of cowardice. And the woman had not come to marry him. The woman had come to work. And the woman had stayed. And the woman had saved his boy. And the man sat down in a chair, with his ribs broken and his heart opened. And he let himself be helped. By the time the snow began to pull back, you had been living in the Ashby house for 2 months, and the arrangement was a thing the Ashbys had not put into words, because the Ashbys had stopped putting things into words. The boy understood. The dog understood. The hired hand who had come back in February did not ask. The town of Clyde, however, was made of sterner stuff, and the town of Clyde was not going to let a woman and a widower live in the same house for 2 months without an opinion. And the opinion was that the only cure was a wedding, and the wedding had better be soon. The first to speak was Mrs. Whitcomb, the preacher's wife, who came up the road in a cutter with a basket of preserves and a question she had been saving since November. She sat in the kitchen for an hour, drank the coffee you had made, and asked, in the way of small-town women, every question that was none of her business. Mrs. Whitcomb left with the preserves uneaten and a new conviction that she would save the Ashbys from themselves. The second to speak was the banker in Clyde, who had not been to the ranch in 2 years, and who came now, in March, with papers in his hand. The papers were not offers of help. The papers were a statement of what was owed. The cattle that had not died in the storm had died in the spring thaw, Harlan signed what he had to sign because the choice was not a choice that he could make alone. And the not choosing was the kind of not choosing a man does when he has decided, without admitting it, that the woman in his house is the only person he trusts with the size of the problem. It was in the second week of April that the conversation you had been waiting for finally happened, and it did not happen the way you had expected. It happened over a fence. You were mending a rail. He was on the other side holding the post. The sun was warm. Joel was at school in Clyde for the first time since the autumn, and the house was empty, and the world was the kind of quiet that asks a man to say the thing he has been holding back. "Why did you stay?" Harlan said. It was not the question he had been holding back. It was a smaller one. You set the rail down. "Because the work needed doing," you said. "And because the boy needed a person who was not afraid of him. And because you said, and you did not look at him, needed a person who was not trying to replace the woman you had lost." He looked at you then, and for the first time, the look was not the look of a man watching a stranger. It was the look of a man who is beginning to admit, against his own will, that the stranger has become something else. "You will not stay forever," he said. It was not a question either. It was the kind of statement a man makes to test the ground in front of him. You did not take the test. You picked up the rail. "I will stay as long as the work needs doing," you said. "I will stay as long as the boy needs me. I will stay until you tell me, with your own mouth, that I should go. I will not stay to be pitied. I will not stay to be a secret. If I am to stay, I am to stay in the open." He did not answer. He took the post on his side of the fence, and you finished the work in silence. But the silence was different now. The world, in the way of worlds, did not wait long. By the end of April, the whole of Clyde knew. By the middle of May, half the town had taken a side. The night Joel came home from school with a black eye and would not say who had hit him, you sat on the porch with Harlan after the boy was asleep. The whiskey was out. The lantern was low. The town was 6 miles away and could not have been further. "I am not going to ask you to leave," Harlan said. He was not looking at you. "I am not going to ask you to stay either. I am going to tell you that I have not been able to say your name. In my own head, without also saying a word I have not been willing to say out loud, and I have not been willing to say it because the last time I said it, I lost the woman I said it to. And I am not ready to be that man again." You did not move. You did not breathe. You let the silence hold the weight of the words, because the words could not hold it themselves. Then you said, quietly, "Then do not say it. Say it when you are ready. I am not going anywhere." And you got up, and you went inside, and the door closed softly behind you, and Harlan sat on the porch for a long time, in the dark, with the weight of what he had not said, and what you had not said, and what you were both, in your own ways, holding for him. It was the sister-in-law who broke it. Her name was Della, and she had been married to Harlan's brother, the brother who had come west with him in '78, and the brother who had gone home to Ohio with a wound that would not heal. Della had not been to the Ashby place since the funeral of the wife, and she came now, in the second week of June, on the stage from Helena, with a trunk and a look that was not quite unkind, and a great deal of what was. She did not say what she had come to say on the first day. She said it on the second, after breakfast, in the parlor, with the door closed. She said it the way women of a certain kind say things that are cruel, with great care. The point, she said, was Joel. Joel needed a name. Joel needed a mother in the eyes of the church, and of the town, and of the bank. Joel did not need a hired hand who slept in the house, even if the hired hand was a good one, and even if the hired hand had saved his life. Joel needed a woman who could be introduced as a woman, and not as a foreman. Harlan did not defend you. He did not defend himself. He sat in the chair and listened, and he did not look at the door, even though you were on the other side of it, because Della had asked you, very politely, to leave the room before the conversation began. You had obeyed. You had gone down the hall to the kitchen. You had heard every word. You did not confront him. You did not give him the chance to explain. You saddled the mare at noon when Della was taking tea in the parlor with the new neighbor woman, and you did not leave a note. You left on the kitchen table the locket your mother had given you, and the leather gloves Harlan had lent you in January, and the book of poetry you had read to Joel in the long nights. You did not say goodbye to Joel because Joel was at school, and because you had decided that if you said goodbye to the boy, you were not going to be able to ride out. You went to Clyde. You did not go to the line cabin. You went to the hotel. You sat in the parlor and drank the tea you had been offered. And you wrote a letter to your cousin in St. Louis. And you told yourself that the man had been right, and that the woman who had been so sure in November had no right to be so sure in June. Harlan came to Clyde that night. He did not bring Della. He did not bring Joel. He came alone on the big bay with the dust of 50 miles on his hat, and he came into the parlor of the hotel, and he stood at the door for a long time before he spoke. You did not get up. You did not turn around. You heard him cross the floor. You heard him stop. You heard him clear his throat. You did not turn around. I did not send you away, he said. His voice was low. I did not say the word. I have not said the word. I will not say the word. Della came. Della said what Della had to say. I did not say it. I did not stop her. And that is the same thing in this country as saying it. And I came here to say, in front of you, and in front of the man behind the bar, and in front of whatever God is listening to a thing said in a hotel in Clyde, Montana, on a Tuesday in June, that I will not be the man who lets you walk out the door and does not follow you. I have lost one woman to this silence. I will not lose another. You turned around. You had not cried in 3 months. You did not cry now. You said, in a voice that was level and that cost you more than anything you had ever said, then say the word. He said it. He said the word. And the word was not the word you had been bracing for. The word was smaller. The word was, marry me. Stay. Be the boy's mother. Be the man of this house's partner. I will not be a man who pretends. I have been a man who pretends, and I am done with it. The town will talk. Della will not come back. The bank will not understand. Joel will not understand for a long time. I will not understand for a long time. Marry me and let us both be confused together, in the open, in front of the God who is listening and the man behind the bar. You did not say yes in a way that sounded like a woman who had been waiting her whole life to be asked. You said yes the way a woman says yes when she has decided, after a long winter and a longer spring, that the man in front of her is the man she was always going to say yes to if he ever had the courage to ask. You said yes the way a person says a thing that is, in the end, very simple. Yes, you said. Yes, you stubborn, broken, beautiful man. Yes. They were married 3 weeks later, in the parlor of the Ashby House, by the preacher from Clyde, in front of a congregation of 12, which was 2 more than the town had expected, and 4 fewer than the town had hoped. Joel stood up at the front in his one good shirt, with the dog at his feet, and when the preacher said the words that bind, Joel took your hand and his father's hand, and he said, very quietly, I knew. He had known, in fact, since November. He had been waiting for the rest of them to catch up. They did not leave the country. They did not run from the town. They stayed on the ranch, and they worked it, and the herd grew. And Joel's name was put on the deed of the South pasture, in his own hand, on his own 18th birthday, in 1893, in the same year the bank in Clyde finally came around. The town of Clyde, in the end, came around. The town of Clyde always comes around, in the way that small towns do, in the way that the world does. Greta Hale, who had ridden into the valley on a borrowed mare in the cold of 1883, with nothing in her saddlebags but a rope and a stubbornness that did not break, died in the same house in 1922, with the same man at her side and Joel grown, and Joel's boy on the floor at her feet. She was buried on the South pasture, under the tree that Joel had planted for her, with the gloves in her hands and the locket on her chest, and the word he had said to her in the parlor of the hotel in Clyde, still in his mouth. The way a man keeps a word he has said only once, and that he has never had to say again. The question she had asked him on the porch in April was a question that I want to leave you with tonight, because I think it is the question that every one of us, in our own way, is asking, in our own valley, of our own stubborn, broken, beautiful man, and of our own self. What are you going to do with the refusal? What are you going to do with the silence? What are you going to do with the word that has not yet been said? Listeners, I want to thank you for staying with me through this long winter and through this longer story. Stories like this one are not about the refusal, and not even about the word, but about the years in between, and the work in between, and the patient, ordinary courage it takes for 2 people to become the kind of family that the world was not expecting. Stay with it. Sit with it. And when the snow melts, ride out and find out. If this story moved you, leave me a note in the comments. Tell me which scene you would have given anything to see, and which one you have lived. And if you have not already, I would be honored if you would subscribe to the channel and tap the bell so you do not miss the next ride. We have a long list of stories ahead, and the trail is wide open and the coffee is hot. Until next time, friends, may your fences hold, may your cattle come home, and may the word you have been holding back find the courage at last to be said. Good night.